allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic from which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I don't have any opening remarks other than to remind anybody who's tuning in who'd like to offer public comment to email me directly before 7 p.m. this evening at jddomenico@pelhamschools.org. Please include your name and your Pelham mailing address, and if possible, keep your remarks brief as I'll be reading them into the public record. Thank you. Dr. Champ, I'll turn this over to you for your presentation for full-time in-person.
Great.
Planning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to come back tonight and to update the board and the public on our plans for reopening with some more specifics than we've been able to present in the past. So let me just share my screen really quickly, and then we'll dive into the detail. My plan is to go through the presentation and then to switch back to where I can see everyone to field questions, because I'm sure you will have some. So can somebody just verify, can you see my screen at this point?
Yes.
Okay, great. So go into present mode. So I'm pleased to be with you tonight, and it's hard to believe, but a year ago, today, depending if you're looking at the date or the day of the week, a year ago, we made the announcement that we would be shutting down schools for a day, and we didn't know at that point in time that it would literally be the last time that we were at school for as we knew it, with all students in school for the better part of a year. So I'm very excited tonight, and on the anniversary of that announcement, to be sharing with you our plans for reopening of the schools towards full in-person instruction. I want to thank the administrative team who jumped into action a year ago and scrambled to put learning resources in place and support teachers and students, who then worked diligently and tirelessly throughout the summer to craft the plan that we have been using since September, our current hybrid model at a 50% model with 6-foot distancing. They dove in, they worked together with us to make sure we had a plan in place and could open our schools, and have successfully done that to this point. We've tweaked the plans along the way, and again, with the assistance of the administrative team, as well as feedback from our teachers. And now, as we round the corner on this school year and are heading with spring break in sight, and shortly after that, the end of the school year, we've been reviewing and tweaking our plans as well, and are pleased to come to you tonight with our plans to reopen the schools. So as I said last time, our priorities really have been these: focusing on the holistic wellness of our students first and foremost, holistic wellness of our staff. Without our staff, we cannot teach our students. So we need to make decisions and put plans in place that take care of both. Also, since the start, we've sought to deliver a core curriculum that is of quality and delivered equitably to students, and to align with our requirements, guidelines, and updated scientific research. We have had a number of planning meetings over the last couple of months that we've mentioned before. Our administrative team in particular has met numerous times during the school day, after school hours, and along with our task force to try to really problem solve around logistical issues, knowing the regulations, knowing our constraints, and working to find solutions very creatively. Also, we've been really pleased to have our reopening task force meetings. I believe we've had 3 meetings so far. We have a couple more to go, and have been really appreciative for the medical experts, medical professionals from our community, parents, and teachers who have joined the administrators on that call to give us feedback in reaction to plans and to think about things from various different lenses. So we're excited to have them on board, and their work will continue. Tonight, we're bringing you kind of a work in progress, but being the timeliness of the information, we wanted to bring these pieces to you now, as we have a couple of weeks in which to get a lot of things finalized and in place to make this full-time return to school a reality. Key questions that we've been tackling, I think we've seen these before, but this has really been the discussion of the groups as we've met. trying to sort out what are the most important pieces of the puzzle. And some key learnings that we think are relevant to the decisions that have been made. One of the biggest pieces is guidance. As the board knows, we sought and advocated for and tried to get guidance multiple times, multiple ways. Did not come, but we did get through our elected officials assistance with that, and they got clarification. Back in September and the summer, we were making all of our plans as a region. We decided to take a more conservative approach, but we did get confirmation through those elected officials who spoke with the state Department of Health that there was more flexibility, so we could in fact take a different look at the guidelines. So the guidelines do call for 6 feet of social distancing or a mask and barrier. So we do have some new flexibility. We can look back 6, 8 months to a year on the international and national level of research that has now come out about COVID, about risk, about distancing, and various mitigation factors. So we do have that as a new source of learning to help inform our decisions along with that guidance. So the guidance hasn't changed, but the research has shown us within that a much more nuanced view of how to prevent spread within the schools and outside of the schools. And finally, anecdotally, we have numbers of schools within the state, in particular on Long Island, that have been using a 3-foot distance with barriers successfully since the fall. So we even have, from conversations that many of us have had with colleagues on Long Island, we're hearing those anecdotal stories of success. So that gives us all really a new perspective and lens to bring to this planning. And as one of our doctors on our committee shared with us, barriers, in addition to potentially stopping some of the aerated spread, are in many ways just a visible reminder of how to keep distance, and they give it a sense of safety as people are moving around in the school environment. So these are all important things, important learnings that help us with really our proposal, which is this. Elementary schools, we're proposing to bring back to full-time in-person instruction for all grades K through 5 on April 12th. You will note that is the week, not immediately after spring break, but it's a week later. We have seen after every holiday break, and we do have a couple holidays over the spring break this year, that there has been a bump in cases. And some of that was travel, some of that was living room spread. In any case, we've seen it with every break. So we think it's important to wait through that bump in cases because we want this move to be as successful as possible. So that's why we're recommending April 12th. It's not in the bullets, but I should add too, we debated about phasing one grade at a time or groups of grade levels. And in speaking with our principals from a logistical level, they felt going in all at once actually would be the easiest from a logistical perspective. It reduced the number of transitions and different programs that we would have going on at once. So that was their recommendation, and all in on April 12th. By waiting till the 12th, as we mentioned in our last meeting, this allows for more of our staff to be fully vaccinated. We anticipate over 50% of our staff, not just our teaching staff, but our entire staff to be fully vaccinated by the time we return from spring break, which positions us in a much safer place for our staff. Gives us better, warmer weather so that we can have those windows open more, teachers can take classes out more and make better use of our outdoor space. And this also will allow us to get furniture set up, as all districts have from the beginning struggled somewhat still with supply lines. This gives us a little bit of lead time to make sure that we have everything in place. So that's why we are recommending April 12th as the start of full-time K-5 instruction. At the secondary level, we are looking to begin a phase-in during April, dependent on a number of things, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. So at the elementary level, what is this going to look like? If you can see closely, and I hope you can see pretty well in the picture, we have started moving furniture back into classrooms because we really need to get a very concrete assessment of what this is going to look like to make sure that we can deliver on what we're promising. So this is a classroom that's been set back up to full capacity, desks at 3 feet with barriers for the students that are there. So that gives you a good sense of the distance that we will be looking at within classrooms. And it's important for parents to understand this because we will be asking parents to make a commitment a decision and a commitment about whether they are going to have their children returning to full-time in-person instruction under these conditions, or whether they're going to be keeping their children home for full virtual instruction. So we wanted to present really visual evidence of what it will look like. Additionally, our HVAC systems are all fully functioning. We get at least about between 6 and 8, so about 7 to 8 turnovers of air in all classrooms throughout every day. And that is are performing at the standards at which they should be performing. We are looking to supplement that though by bringing in box fans and windows for exhaust, and also air purifiers as something to supplement currently our efforts. Since we are increasing density, we want to do everything we can to improve the air quality in our classrooms. So those are a couple of our mitigation strategies. In addition to those, of course, we're going to continue to have students wear masks, require students wear masks and use their portable barriers. We're exploring some different barriers that may not have the wide ridge around it, the white band, so that we could possibly improve visibility for students in the classroom. As I said, open windows. In many classrooms, the windows have never closed all year. It's somewhat cold winter, and we appreciate people's patience with that. But again, weather will be warming up. We'll be making sure that those windows are open and making sure teachers feel free to use outdoor space for any activities they deem appropriate as much as possible. I've already mentioned the vaccination rate, which is another mitigating factor. And then finally, as we've spoken in the past, we are implementing thanks to Julia Chung and the nurses, a surveillance testing program. We've had that in place for the last about a month or so, really piloting it. And the purpose of that is really to establish a baseline. And we want to stress this because this we feel is a key aspect of our return to school plan. And we are expecting, we really need everyone's partnership in this. We need everyone to be willing to participate in this. As we've spoken with the medical professionals on our committee, they have underscored the need for testing to be broad and random so that it is across the entire system. So we can't depend on the same 10% of people to keep coming getting tested every week. We have to be able to consistently test across the district to really get a true baseline of COVID spread within our schools. So our goal is based on 20% monthly, so it's about 5% per week. All students who are coming to in-person instruction will be expected to participate in this program. It is non-invasive. I think we're going to be putting some emails out again, recirculating the lovely video that I got to star in, where I was getting my nose swabbed. These are Binex Now rapid tests. It's not the same kind of super invasive nasal swab that you would get at Glen Island or a normal PCR test. It's not painful at all. It's not uncomfortable. It's very quick and non-invasive. This data helps us to establish what is going on within our schools. It's important for us to establish that before we phase students back in, but then also to continue to gauge what is the percentage of positivity within the schools, so we can make sure that our mitigation strategies are being successful and we can continue to keep our schools open, continue to phase our students back in. So at the elementary level, this is the schedule that we are looking at once we begin bringing students all back on April 12th. We're proposing moving the start time back now to 8:30. We do need a little bit of setup time there in the morning, but we're going to look to start our staggered arrival at 8:30. So about 8:30 to 8:40, and then specials and classes will begin as usual. Lunch is probably right about the same time, give or take a little bit. And then we'll begin staggered dismissal a little bit earlier than what we're doing now. Right now it's 2:50. We're going to push that back to 2:40. But the purpose of that is to move the open office hours for our virtual students to the end of the day. You do recall at the beginning we had office hours in the morning and afternoon. In our most recent adjustment, we eliminated one of those, which was the afternoon, because they were seemed to be less used. Now that we've gotten into the new routines, what we're hearing from teachers is in the morning, the students more want to get on and talk about their loose tooth or their dog, or kind of those social emotional check-ins, connections, which are very nice, but which could also be accomplished during morning meeting as part of the normal class structure. They felt like, especially with this new shift, they want to have really dedicated time for our fully virtual students when they've had their day's lessons and have questions and have things that the teachers can check in a very timely and specific manner so that they can give them actionable feedback. So that's why we're looking to move the open office hours to the end of the day. Specific school specific schedules, as usual, will be forthcoming from the buildings once they figure out all the different details of your IE blocks and anything specific regarding dismissal and arrival and location. So more will be coming there. This is the general framework. We are recommending continuation of the early release on Wednesdays, though, because as long as we still have full virtual students and students in the classroom, our teachers will continue to have cameras in the classroom, will continue to be expected to use Google Classroom, and we'll need to continue with Google Meet. And the planning that is involved in continuing that process is why we've needed to give our teachers that time from the get-go. So we're continuing to recommend that as we phase back to full-time in person. Point of information here is an important point as you're thinking, as parents will think about decisions. Again, we're moving to desks being at 3 feet in the classroom. We will be continuing to have our students eat lunch in the classroom. Therefore, lunch will be distanced only at 3 feet. Masks will be off for eating, but they will have barriers, which is, again, within the guidance, as was mentioned before. There are options within that. If there's, concerns, teachers could maybe have half the class eat, every other student take off their mask and eat while the others maybe read or do a quiet activity, then switch. There's, a lot of different logistical ways to handle that, and we're going to let people figure that out class by class. But the real important information that students will be eating at their desks without masks 3 feet apart. We have heard again from colleague districts that this has been successful. Certainly, if there's opportunities to spread out within the classroom during those times more than 3 feet, that's, go to a quiet reading nook, go to a area that's a little bit farther away. Of course, we're going to make use of those opportunities. And some schools may even be able, depending on their facilities use, to rotate classes into larger spaces. A really key important part of this process, though, and this is something that we bring up now because it's important to, again, weigh into the decision. This has been a year for flexibility. We all recognize that, and we have been as a community and as a school district, very flexible with our families. What that has produced is a little bit of a revolving door, which has added a lot of complication to the instructional process for our teachers. They don't know exactly who's coming in every day. They planned for 3 students to be full virtual, and then 6 students turned out full virtual. There's a lot of adjustment that's caused. So that's taken a bit of a toll on the instructional process. But I would say even more importantly, as we are heading towards full-time in person, this is a step towards normal. It will not be fully normal, but it is a step back towards normal and a step towards where it's really important for us to know who to expect because we have to plan for who to expect. And we will, one of the important pieces of that, I'm trying to make sure I'm it here. Yes, I'll be getting to that more in a few minutes. So we really want to, and are asking for parents' cooperation in curtailing some of that. We'll be past the last break period. So it's really going to be important if we want to maximize the instruction for our students from April 12th through the end of the school year. It's important that they commit to be, those who choose to come in are committed to being there every day. So we're going to be asking for that commitment from parents. We're going to have to plan our classroom spaces based on that commitment. So there's a lot of logistical planning that goes into making sure that we can provide a spot for every student. So that's a piece of the commitment as well. Of course, if students are sick, they should stay home and recuperate. Obviously, as they've had all year, they will still need a negative COVID test upon return. But we kind of need to bring back some of those normal rhythms of life. If a student's sick, they need to stay home and that's an excused absence. They should stay home, get better, get their negative COVID test, and then we'll make up the work for them when they come back. Or if we're able to send that home while they're out, we will do that. But we want to try to break the cycle of kind of in and out and just accessing remote because it's convenient. So we're asking folks, if your child's sick, to keep them home, take the sick day, bring in your excuse, and come back with your negative COVID test, as you have been throughout the year. We're going to ask that virtual learning be accessed only, certainly by our full virtual students, but we will honor the ability for students to log into the Google Classroom if they're on a mandated quarantine, if they're awaiting test results to pass the daily screener. So I say that as, one of the great examples, if you have a sore throat or runny nose, and you can't pass the screener, therefore you can't come to school. I know, Jessica, you have mentioned multiple times how many COVID tests you got at the beginning of the school year. If a student is in that position where you're awaiting your results so that you can come back in, we will honor that if it's just those kinds of things. If they're genuinely sick and they're going to, and they need to rest, they need to rest. If they're just awaiting those screener results, we will allow them to access the Google Classroom. But we need to work together to curtail things like travel, vacations, staying home on test days. That was a popular one at the high school. So you might have, I know we're talking elementary now, but there might be 20 students out of 23 home on a test day. Things like that really need to stop as we work towards coming back to full-time in-person instruction. So that's what full-time is going to look like. Fully remote learning will still be a place and will still be an option. And so that's really the choice that we're going to be asking parents to make. It will be the same model that it currently is. So those who are familiar with it, are comfortable with it, nothing will change. It will still be accessed through the Google Meet using Google Classroom. As I said earlier, we'll have open office hours in the afternoon. We do have a subgroup a work group on our task force that is looking at how do we support virtual students instructionally. And support teachers in supporting the students that are both home and back in school. Because I think the reality is, and I think it's just a common sense reality, when you've got the bulk of the students are now in the classroom, attention is naturally going to shift more to making sure that they're safe and monitoring and managing the classroom in front of you. But we do want to make sure that our remote students are still attended to, which is why we want to really committed to maintaining that office hours to guarantee that daily connection with them. And just thinking forward, it's not part of this presentation, but just as a point of information, if we are in a position when we come back in September where we do need to continue to provide virtual instruction opportunities at the elementary level, I think we all recognize we would like to start the year with those full virtual teachers in place, should that be required next year. And we will be seeking information about that probably before the end of June this year, because we want to plan our class lists and staffing appropriately. So again, this is what I've echoed before. We really need a firm commitment from families at this time as to whether they plan for their child to finish the year in person or fully virtual. And I recognize that some feel they have to go fully virtual and not by choice. And I wish that we had more space, that we had other options. At this point in time, these are really the two options we have, because as we bring more students back in, the distancing goes down to 3 feet between students. There's really no hybrid as we know it. So we really are will be bringing the 50% 6-foot hybrid model to an end as of April 12th. So these are the two choices that we're asking our parents to make. We're having an info session tomorrow, about one at 9:30 in the morning, 7 o'clock at night. I'll be going through the same presentation and opening it up for Q&A for parents. So we invite anyone who's got questions to come. We may not have every answer, but we'll be there to listen. And if we don't have answers, we will seek answers out and get those back to you. As I said before, commitment is critical for planning of space. Right now, we had the initial interest survey that we did a couple weeks back, but we need actual names and commitments in classrooms, because we need to look and see, do we have our big classes in big classrooms, small classrooms in small classrooms? Do we need to move classrooms? Do we need to move somebody to the library? We need to figure out exactly how much space is needed so that we can guarantee the 3 feet for students. And we're aiming to have at least 6-foot space for our teachers as well. So we really need commitments, because there are a lot of dominoes that go into effect depending on who decides they're coming back and who is not, which is why we need the commitment, and we can't allow a lot of flexibility. We'll be sending out the surveys on Friday and asking for those responses by noon on St. Patrick's Day. Again, come to the info sessions. I know there's parent-teacher conferences that day, so there may be some discussions about it later on in the day. We can work with case by case, but we're asking folks, if at all possible, to make that decision and return the survey by noon on March 17th. So then what does this look like at the secondary level? So thanks to some of our teachers who took the time to sit down and pose for us. This is really what spacing was going to look like at the middle school and high school. It really is very, I'll call it normal. But again, at 3-foot distancing, you're dealing with bigger people. You know, our high school students in particular, but even some of our middle school students are much more adult size. So when you're measuring 3 feet from the middle of my head, 3 feet to the next person's head, that's a lot closer than if you're measuring 3 feet from the middle of a third grader to the next third grader. So again, we want to be very transparent about what this is going to look like because parents need to make important decisions. Um, at the high school and middle school, we as well will have the box fans and air purifiers in all of our classrooms. Important to note, at the middle school in particular, some of our windows don't open because that is our fully air conditioned building. That being said, there are higher quality air filters at the middle school because of those conditioned systems. So we're still getting, at all schools, we're getting at least 6 to 8 turnovers of air in every classroom. Because of the conditioned system at the middle school, we're actually getting more there. But you may not always have the opportunity for an open window. So just a point of information. We will be looking, really using the same mitigation strategies as mentioned before, 3-foot distancing, mask barriers, etc. The surveillance testing that we mentioned at the elementary will also be going on at the secondary. I think it's particularly critical at the secondary level. I think as everyone knows, we've seen and research has shown outside of our schools, in our community, in our country, there's more spread amongst older students. So for us to continue to keep students safe, continue to assess the effectiveness of our model, it will be critical that we have full participation in our surveillance testing program. So we do expect to have our middle school and high school students participating in that across the board. Again, same attendance expectation. And I will say it's probably been a little bit more fluid, especially at the high school level. Our students, if they choose in person, are expected to attend when they are scheduled to be in person. It is not a, I don't feel like getting up. It's not a, it's rainy and I don't want to walk. It's, if they're expected to be in school on that day, we are expecting them to be in school that day, and we need full cooperation on that. We will continue with our fully remote instructional model at the secondary level the same way that we are at the elementary level. So the challenges that we face at the secondary schools are really, and we've mentioned these before, but they're real challenges. And I should say, we have tried every which way. This is not lack of trying, not lack of looking, not lack of creativity or digging deep. These are real challenges that we face that many schools don't face. So we do have small classrooms at the middle school and high school relative to our class sizes. And part of it just because it's, especially the high school, is a 100-year-old building. When we did our analysis, 50 to 65% of our classrooms cannot even achieve 3-foot distancing at full capacity of our current enrollment. So that's one challenge. Another challenge that is unique to us, different than many other schools, but those of you who were with us through the bond days will remember this, our room utilization is maxed out. Room utilization is just the analysis of if we have 9 periods a day and 50 classrooms in the building, how many times are those 50 classrooms open throughout the day? And I think when during the bond time, we were told somewhere around 75 to 80% is optimal classroom utilization. That's a right size building. We're at about 95% utilization, meaning most of our classrooms are used 8 or all 9 periods in every single school day. That presents challenges that other districts don't have when it comes to moving big classes into different classrooms. We don't have the classrooms to move them into, or even the concept of satellite classrooms. So let's say one room can only fit 24 students, but there's 29 scheduled in that class. In some schools, they're able to have a satellite location where those extra 5 students or a rotating number of those 5 students will go take turns going for, and then they'll remote into their class from the satellite room. We don't even have those spaces to create satellite rooms. And that's a function of room utilization. So it's a particular unique challenge we wanted to share. Our cafeteria, as you know, we have a shared cafeteria between the 2 buildings. It's really only big enough to accommodate the full middle school at once with a little bit of extra space. It is not big enough to accommodate 2 full schools. Largely, that's why we've had open campus for so many years, for many, many years. And this year we expanded that to 9th grade, which we will need to continue. So our cafeteria space works on a nice weather day. It does not work on an inclement weather day without a backup plan. Our gyms, middle school gym is being used as a gym, but our other gyms, the main gym is used for gym most days. Our blue gym, I believe, is used for lunch every day, and then there's some variation in between. The gyms are being used as overflow for lunch now, and they also will be part of our backup plan for inclement weather days. So that presents issues. If lunch is in the gym, phys ed can't be in the gym, where is phys ed going to be? If it's inclement weather outside, they can't be outside, where are they going to be? We're out of classrooms, where are they going to? Those are the type problems that we're now trying to solve. But again, we're getting to those solutions. Um, Additional space, yep, I already mentioned that. And I already mentioned our attendance issue of a significant numbers of students are choosing to stay home on in-person days. So I come back to that point again, not to harp on attendance, but to say at the secondary level, if it's a student's cohort day currently, and they choose to stay home, and then they choose to stay home on a regular basis, that's a seat we can't give to another student who wants to be in school full time. So when it comes to the secondary level, we need parents to make and students to make a strong commitment that if they're coming in person for whatever days that they're assigned to come in, that they will be there, because that has a direct implication on someone else not being able to be there that day. Which is why it's just that much more critical at the high school level. Do we get that commitment? All these things could to put together. Our challenge really comes down to the fact that with our rooms as they are and our enrollment, we cannot fit 100% capacity right now at 3 feet distance. So we, at this point, need more information for us to finalize our plan. So as we said before, we're going to be surveying parents. That's really our next step in planning. We know the logistics. We've got brainstorm solutions. I'm going to show you some more details about order of phase in and bell schedule. But what we need before we can go any further in this planning process is that firm commitment from parents about who wants to come back in person and who is going to stay full virtual for the rest of the year. And depending on what that percentage comes in at will determine then our future planning. If 30% of students say they plan to stay home for the rest of the year and only 70% come back in, we can probably put together a plan that will allow all 100% of that 70% to return, all students who want to come back to come. But if we have more students say they want to come back for in-person instruction than we can accommodate safely at 3 feet, we're then going to likely have to look at a modified hybrid model, something that maybe brings students in. Right now we're at a 50%. So we've come up with some models. Maybe it could be 75% in, maybe it could be 66% in, maybe 80%. There's different ways that we could work that, and we've got some different options. But before we know what the right option is, we need to know who's planning to come back. So here would be the phase order of those numbers once we decide what percentage we can come in of those who want to come back. If it's all students who want to come back, or if we have to do a variation of a cohort that brings more students back, regardless of which approach, we do plan for this to be the phase in order of the grades. 8 and 12, our seniors, they missed the end of their junior year and they've missed their entire senior year, their last chance. And there's a lot of things that seniors really want to experience. It's their last chance to experience it in our high schools and to be together. So they would likely be our first for high school. 8th grade at the middle school. Part of that, to be honest, comes from the fact that these students will be taking their first Regents exam. I'm going to pause here for a moment and editorialize for just a moment, but that's, I think, on behalf of the administrative team. Unfortunately, another piece of why we can't set our timeline yet until we can't set the timeline until we have our cohorts, but we also can't set the timeline until we get a few more answers from the Board of Regents. Unfortunately, the U.S. Department of Education is still insistent upon maintaining the standardized testing requirements of schools this year. A waiver has been submitted, but at this point, we have not been released from the federal government from offering the certain accountability Regents exams and 3 through 8 testing, which seems, as we've been saying, cruel and unusual punishment in this year of all years, that we should have to put that stress in front of our students and in front of our teachers. We don't know, the Board of Regents is meeting next week, mid next week, to make some determinations about some of those assessments and what flexibilities we may have in timing of administration. If we have to do these, do we have flexibility in timing? Because for example, right now, the ELA 3 through 8 ELA exams are planned for like the third week in April. I think the week of April 20th. I don't have that note in front of me, but it could be right in the midst of us trying to bring our students back. And the last thing we want to do to our students is welcome them back to school and set a state assessment in front of them on day 1 or day 2. And that's the cruel and unusual punishment. And it's really, in our opinions, I would say professional. The word is escaping me right now. Don't feel it's the right decision on the part of the U.S. Department of Education, but right now that's beyond our control. So while we get more data, while we wait for determinations about assessment flexibility, that's part of what we need before we can set our timeline for high school and middle school phase in. That being said, with the assumption that there will still be some regions out there, that is part of why we planned 8th grade to be in that first band. The next wave, we would want to bring 6th and 9th grade back. Our 6th grade, while they all have been in school in hybrid, they have not been in school as a full class at middle school and high school level respectively. So we want to make sure that we get them back to start to have, again, that full middle school, full high school experience and fill in any areas that they're struggling and get them caught up. And then the final phase would likely be 7, 11, and 10. One important note, this was some debate at the task force yesterday, but and I'm glad they raised the question. As we phase in the grades full time, we will also maintain the cohorted hybrid classes in the other grade levels. So for example, the first phase in, we would still have 6th and 7th graders coming on their cohorted hybrid schedule, but the 8th graders would then come back all together. So we would be able to maintain both the old hybrid while we phase in the new in-person instruction. And again, this points back to the reason for us to be asking for assistance with the surveillance testing program. The middle school, high school, once we start this phase in, what we'd be looking at for a bell schedule is really back to something that's pretty normal. First period starting at 8:15, 9th period ending around 2:46, and then academy being that last 20 minutes or so of the school day. We still have to work through some logistics of, are we going to alternate between in-person academy or virtual academy? We want to be sure to support all learners and create a system that works. The main difference in the bell schedule is that we're going to continue to allow 5-minute passing time between classes so that we can reduce hallway density. Hallway passing is a time where they are likely going to be closer than 3 feet. So I think it's important to recognize that as well as parents are making decisions. Students will be closer during that hall passing time. At the secondary level, we are as well recommending the early release to continue on Wednesdays. One point of information, I think I misspoke a few slides back on air quality. Our current systems are getting 6 to 8 turnovers of air in classrooms per hour, not per day. So we've got good fresh air coming into our buildings thanks to the great work of our facilities department. So again, bringing us close to the end here, that we will be asking for that full commitment from parents and students by the 17th, so that we can understand how many will return, so we can finish out our plannings. And again, one student who commits and then doesn't come is taking a seat from someone who may want that seat. So it's really important to take these decisions very seriously. And finally, just a reminder, it takes a community. Getting this done is a gargantuan effort, but it's such an important one. We all need to work together to make sure it happens. We need our kids to be able to access the education that they deserve and be able to finish this year strong. So ways that you can help are continue to participate in the surveillance testing program, as you've been doing, keeping children home when they're ill, reinforcing well-fitting masks. That's really important as we increase our density too. Quality masks for our students so that they're fully protected. Continue your physical distancing. And please continue to review the family health agreement. That is I'm proud as a community that we put that in place and have adhered to that. And we just ask folks to continue to refer back to that on a regular basis so you can be cognizant of those agreements and help us all to make the schools as safe as we can for the return of our students. And with that, I'm going to stop presenting and open it up to the board for questions.
Thank you for all of your time and effort. I didn't thank the task force and all the administrators and teachers and you, Dr. Champ, for all the hard work for the last year, but especially in these last few months as we've gotten to this point. I just want to reiterate something that I think I heard, which I just want to confirm this because I think it's important to state. No matter how the survey results turn out at the secondary level, I think I'm hearing you say that the goal is to increase the in-person instruction time
Yes, absolutely.
from where we
And
are right now.
correct. Yeah, we're at about a 50% right now. 50% of students are getting about a 50% experience. I guess that's the best way to put it. And we know that we can increase that. The question is, can we increase it to 100% of those who want to come back? And that's why we need the data. We definitely are increasing it no matter what. So whether it's through a rotation where students maybe instead of 2 days a week are able to access 4 out of 6 days of a cycle or something like that, we know that we can increase the students' in-person time in school. And then once we get the data, we'll be able to determine just how far we can push that towards meeting the needs of everyone who wants to be in school.
Okay, thank you.
Vinny, I think you had your hand up, then Jess Young.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. I apologize if I missed it, but the rollout after the elementary school, which we're talking about starting the week of April 12th, the rollout to the middle school and high school, or when would that start up? Is it the following week? I know that it's obviously going to take a while. It's not all going to happen at once, but are we talking about the week of the 19th you start rolling that, or 2 weeks later? Do you have that time frame?
We don't have it set yet. We actually had started to look at some dates, but then that's when we realized that that we needed more data. But more importantly, I think it comes down to knowing what those state assessment dates look like is a big piece of it. And there was another piece and it's escaping right now. That was one of the primary pieces, knowing the state assessment dates. And also one of the subgroups, this was the other piece, one of the work groups for the task force, it's made up of mostly our medical professionals. They're contemplating what metrics might be of assistance to us in guiding our steps as far as phasing in and then assessing that we're, if we've got problems or if we're still okay. So we were hoping for maybe some metrics to also give us a green light as to when that time comes. Part of the problem we're running into, but we're still working it through, is the ideal metrics are not necessarily available. So we're trying to figure out, are there metrics that we can use to guide it? What are the state testing dates, and how do we align our phase back in of students in a way that makes sense and is not problematic to them when it comes to the state assessments. But we do anticipate in April. I definitely will say you will see those phase-ins begin in April. I just don't want to commit to a firm date until we find out, especially that Board of Regents information.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Jessica?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I know you, thanks again for the information. It was great. Thanks for all the hard work on putting this together. When you were talking about the elementary schools and the lunch within the classroom, is there, with the nicer weather, will there be opportunity for them to eat outside, or is that not something that's possible at the elementary level?
Oh, I think, yeah, definitely. I know right now, Illinois in particular, they're fortunate they come up and they use Franklin Field all the time.
Oh, okay.
They use it for recess, but I think sometimes they bring their food up there with them. Jim had put out a bid for tents, which we expect to come in at some point next week to see if we might, I know we explored that back in the fall. We're exploring it again, just as a kind of to your question, to have an outdoor opportunity if the weather is not maybe ideal or if they need shade. But yes, to whatever degree building principals are able to work with teachers to allow that kind of flexibility, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. John?
I think Leah was before me.
Oh,
I'm a
sorry.
latecomer. I'm a latecomer to putting my hand up.
Okay, Leah, do you want to go then?
Sure, thank you. I just have a quick question, but I wanted to echo what everybody else had said. Thank you very much for this. It was very clear, and thank you to all of the administrators for all of the incredible work that you've been putting into this plan. My question is just a logistical one. The week before we start with the elementary students, the bump anticipation week, would that be hybrid or would that be fully virtual for everyone?
At this point, we're planning for a regular hybrid week. You know, we were able to do that after February break without having to close. You know, there were some individual students quarantined here and there. It's really the last opportunity where we're going to really ask parents, if you traveled and you needed to keep your child home to travel quarantine, do it for everyone's good, everyone's benefit. Let's try to make sure that we get everybody back safe, ready to go that next week. So, and thankfully with the vaccines coming out, we're hoping to see some changes to quarantining regulations for our staff. I know George Latimer and the Westchester County Department of Health have basically put the state on notice that they're planning to adopt the CDC's guidelines for quarantine unless the state tells us otherwise. So we're just waiting for a green light from them. So that's going to help us significantly since, again, as I said, so many staff are fortunate to get vaccinated. And that hopefully will help us with exposure as well. So
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
I actually think I saw an article confirming that today.
Yep. So we just need to get the green light from the county that we're all going to move ahead in that direction. Yeah. John, I think you're up now.
Question and a comment. You know, I want to thank you as well as everyone else has here. You know, we sort of see it. We don't see it as close as obviously the administrators do, but it's apparent how much time and effort and mental power has been expended to come up with this. My question is, I can't quite get my head around the high school, how we're going to allocate, you know, full in-person learning at the high school. It seems to me, and I don't know what the break point is. I mean, is there a breaking point where we can accommodate those who wish to be there full time? Is it 70%? Is it 65%? Do you have any notion of what that number might be?
We don't have an exact number. My gut is that it's around 70%, somewhere between 70 and 80. But this is really why we need names, because literally they're going to have to go, once they get those names, go through schedules and see where that falls within classrooms. It's going to be a very labor intensive, but that's the only real way we know how to do it, to say, yes, we can get X number of students back in.
My recollection is that the high school has all different sizes of classrooms. I mean, I think there's a certain number of very standard sized ones, but then there's a whole bunch of other ones which are all over the place.
Yeah, very much so.
So that becomes triply complicated trying to figure out that the courses that people who are coming back, how they're going to get slotted into classrooms. I don't think there's a computer program that could do that.
No, I wish.
My comment has to do with testing, because I've heard it a number of times expressed that you know, that it's going to take a toll on students and teachers to roll out testing this spring, and I'm sure that it will. But I don't. How else would we assess where our students are after a year of being out of school, essentially? I mean, how are we going to assess that otherwise? So, is there some other assessment we could use that doesn't feel so high pressure? But I think we need that information. I think we need it.
Oh, agree. And this is where I'll ask Dr. Garcia to speak up. We do have formative assessments, diagnostic benchmarks that we use regularly. So we internally can and do assess. So we don't necessarily feel the need for those particular standardized assessments. Steve, I know you've got meetings upcoming with the directors to talk about this exact question, but if you want to jump in and just share a little bit.
Yeah, we do use Ames web testing for our students in grades 3 through 8. 3 times a year. So that's like our benchmark assessments we use. And we've done it this year as well. I'm not going to get into political discussion about how I personally feel about New York State standardized tests.
I'm not asking you to.
But just because I don't want to, like, get into it. But I do have my personal feelings about it. Look,
Tell us what you really
my gut feeling is that the state's going to come back and say, I'll be surprised if they say, hey, administer these tests in April. They may say, we want it done within the year, which means that it could happen in the fall, right? It could happen, maybe in December. Who knows? We're kind of not aware what direction it's going to go into. But I think that, look, we can talk about it, like, whether it's good or bad for kids and everything else. But, it's just surprising, let's just say that, with such a disjointed experience for students across the country and across, the world, that we're going to take assessments which are based on standards when there was a different type of society and different set of expectations, say, here, this is where you should be, and go from there. You have to start somewhere, but I'd love to be able to have the kids in person for a while, be able to kind of see where they really are, right, with our classroom assessments and our other diagnostic assessments, see what they really need to go, and what they need to, learn and where they need to progress, rather than kind of, we know what's going to happen when kids are given these state assessments and scores come out. It's going to be manipulated, and it is what it is. But look, if it happens, it happens. We'll be ready, and the kids will take the test and see where it goes.
Well, it's comforting to know that we have other ways of assessing the progress or lack of progress
Yes.
that we've seen. I guess from the state's perspective, they need a tool to understand how the students have done on a statewide basis.
Yeah.
So I can understand their desire to do it. The flexibility question that you bring up seems like one that they should have some.
Yeah.
some
Well,
empathy.
it's interesting, John, because I find that it's not necessarily the state that's calling for these tests this year. They seem to be kind of trying to get data. They want data from us and every school district. In fact, there's a survey that was released yesterday to all schools to kind of collect data, asking the question you're asking. How are you assessing kids in your school district now?
Right.
So that they can use that as evidence when they go to the federal government, which is really, they're the ones which are coming down and saying, you still have to administer those exams which are connected to Every Student Succeeds Act, right? The ESSA exams, the accountability exams, right? The state is basically saying, if we have to go down that road to actually be forced to give those exams, they're going to do the bare minimum, like for the Regents exams, right? The bare minimum, not all of them, just 4 Regents exams, right? And it's interesting because it's opposite, or it's different from maybe the attitude that we've seen from the state in the past. And Cheryl can attest to that as well. They're very standardized test driven. Now it's sort of like the state actually recognizes that this is going to be very problematic. It's actually now the federal government, which gave the waiver last year, different administration, right? But the states actually applied for a waiver for this year. It's this current, administration that's the one that's saying, wait a minute, we want to provide the line. So, and I'm not always one to say, hey, the state's, supporting us and everything else, but this time around, they seem to be trying to kind of find a way to make it, I think, a little easier, having kids kind of ease into it rather than kind of, come with the top down. So we'll see what happens, right?
I think it's an important discussion. Thanks for, reassuring us all that we do have tools in place to identify issues that we need to work on in the coming school year to make up for what we perhaps couldn't provide before. And that's, I think, the important point for me. So thanks for that.
Sure.
All right, are there other questions?
I guess I just wanted to ask, not that I assume you have a firm answer yet, but at the elementary level, are they looking at ways that they will deliver music instruction? I know with instruments and singing, there's more limitations because of the masks and singing projects. and it's been successful. I guess the delivery of music instruction has been more successful given the constraints because of the hybrid makeup. So will they be doing music outside or?
We haven't gotten to that discussion
Yeah.
yet. Yeah.
Those are
But,
the kind of details, though, that might be
Yeah.
hashed
Yeah,
out,
you
but a
know,
little
and
different than what's been already.
yeah, they could change. But you know, and that reminds me too, I think one important thing, and I said it with a task force, but I don't think I said it today. I think our goal number one is going to have to be to get the kids back in school in classes first. I know there will be a tendency for people to want to just go back to, okay, it's business as usual. Let's get all the music programs going back up. Let's get all the after school activities going. Let's get all the clubs and everything, you know, end of year activities. We've got to really be careful and take this step by step, prioritize getting the kids back first, and make sure that that goes well. And then those other pieces in time we can get to. And I think it's important too to remember we're going to be back, but it's still not going to be normal. So I think if folks can give us the time to take it one step at a time, and certainly the task force is going to continue. Administrators are continuing to plan that level of detail, but we'll get there on that discussion. Leah, another question?
Yes, thank you. This maybe is a question for Julia, and it's another logistical question. So we're going to have 3 feet of distance now in between our students instead of 6 feet in most of the classrooms, but the contact tracing rules so far have not changed, right? So that if somebody tests positive, we're still going to have to trace or still have to quarantine people who are within 6 feet of that person.
Yes, that is correct. And right now, you know, we look at in the elementary schools, we certainly have to quarantine the entire class because everybody's eating with their mask off. But secondary schools, we've just been really kind of centering, like finding out who the individual is and then looking at just the perimeter of that person and just quarantining those individuals. So we're going to probably continue to do that.
And that reminds me, the secondary schools, we're looking to set student desks or tables up at a 6-foot distance in the cafeteria. Since they're older and because of the spread tends to be more among secondary older students, we're going to try to maintain the 6-foot distance at the secondary building during lunch. Eileen, I see you have a question.
Thank you. I have 2 actually. The first one is about the surveillance testing. I know what the plan is. I know that we're rolling that out. Are there metrics around the surveillance testing, and what are they like? If we're doing the surveillance testing, and if we find what are we using it to do?
Well, right now we're trying to establish a baseline, just to say out of X number of tests, we had X number of positives, and to just establish some sort of level of where we are. And then, you know, I guess based on a percentage basis, once we increase the number of students, we get more tests. Are we still maintaining a relative similar percentage, or are we seeing a percentage increase all of a sudden?
And then that would lead to whatever decisions we might have to make at that point.
Yeah, and it might be if we saw a spike in a school, or if we saw a spike at a grade, one level, maybe we've got to pause and say, okay, do we have enough mitigation strategies in place? Do we need to backtrack a little, reduce density again? Or is it coming from outside? You know, we really haven't been able to track too much spread to within school up until this point in time. So if we start seeing spread within school, that will be of concern.
Okay. And then my other question is just around the high school. It's less a question, more of a plea, that if we find that we simply can't have 100% of the students who want to be back in, that we try to do something to accommodate as many seniors as possible. I don't have a senior. Just saying, I feel for them.
You'd be surprised. They may not all want to be back.
They may not. That's fine. The ones who do, it seems like it would be nice if they could.
Yes, agreed. Okay, Jess, I think, did you have some public, do we need to transition to public comment?
Yes, and because it's not on the formal agenda, but it was in the meeting notice, I want to make a motion for public comment. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Sue. John, I see your hand up for a second. Any questions or comments? On favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Okay, this one comes from Delia Callow. Thank you for presenting my question. Our kids will remain fully virtual as we have high-risk jobs and a high-risk family member living with us. How will the district ensure the quality of the education for the virtual kids and virtual kids will not deteriorate? Because we are not in the majority of people that can do FTIP and do not have the power of numbers to advocate for ourselves, we are concerned our children will be further marginalized and ignored. How can we ensure this doesn't happen? And I forgot to mention at the start of this, and I mentioned it when we were in person, we collect all the public comment at all of our meetings and respond to them. Either Dr. Champ or I will respond via email in the next day or so with the response. But it's typical at our meetings that we don't respond and provide answers at our public comment. This comes from Seth Cohen. Is it possible to go full-time in person but have occasional access to remote? Our daughter has several doctor's appointments for an ongoing issue, and being able to access her classes while out of school has been very valuable. Thank you for your help with this. This one comes from Noel Tersch. Can you please confirm the length of the high school's academy session? It appears as if it's being shortened from its current duration. If so, can you please explain why it's being shortened at a time when students are relying on this extra help? And Noel lives at 334 Highbrook Avenue. This one comes from Tom Purcell at 101 Monterey Avenue. How should our 11th grader, who's in 2 classes with mostly 12th graders, return for the phased-in return? Would she go in with 11th grade or 12th grade? What happens if she is the only 11th grader in the class? Will the teachers be able to focus on the virtual kids as well? She's afraid of being left out. Thanks for your help. I believe that's every question that came in. I apologize for the clunkiness of this. One of my least favorite parts of the remote meetings is managing the public comment and not missing. So we will respond to those questions in the coming days. And also, I think Dr. Champ's sessions tomorrow morning and or evening will also touch on what we've presented tonight and maybe get to some more questions. So
Yeah, and what I was going to say many times, and just thinking even of a couple of those, a lot of those are really building specific questions that may just be best addressed to the building principal or the guidance counselor if they're kind of a unique situation for a family or for a particular
certainly.
Child. So
Okay.
yeah, those
I'll
can
be sure
be
to
answered.
forward them on
Yep.
to the appropriate people so
Great.
they get responses. Okay, thank
you.
you. So I believe that brings us to the end of our in-person session. So I'd like to propose that we move to executive session for the purposes of the employment history of a particular person or persons. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Everybody's hands went up at once. So John and Leah, I'll say. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you to everybody in the public for joining us for this first part of our night. And we'll look forward to the sessions tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks.